Hello, collective listeners. On today's episode, we have Cody Coley, the head strength and conditioning coach at Christian Brothers High School in Tennessee. I love this conversation because Cody has a different background than most strength coaches, being a law enforcement officer and then also working in logistics on the business side and then coming into strength and conditioning. So it's really interesting to hear his philosophy in how he applies those backgrounds into his current strength and conditioning career. Along with that, we discuss a lot of different things that I think people will enjoy listening to. So, as always, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy. What's going on, collective listeners? On today's episode, we have Cody Coley, head strength and conditioning coach with Christian Brothers High School out in Memphis, Tennessee. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
What's up, my man? Let's do it. Let's do it.
Hey, I have talked with Cody a bunch over the phone already, and I already know it's going to be a great episode. Listeners are really going to enjoy it. A very high level thinker and somebody who also asks a lot of questions and wants to learn a lot. So I think everybody's going to be really interested in hearing what you've got to say. Well, first off, can you kind of just give us your background in athletics, strength and conditioning, and what brought you to your current position?
Yeah, I've done a lot of things in my life, from being a cop to working in operation management and logistics. And several years ago, just kind of got this wild eye. Like when I was in law enforcement, when we went to the police academy, I won the top PT award. All right. All my life, something about the weight room has kind of been the thing for me. Like I was an average high school athlete, and I would go work out all the time, like a lot of kids do nowadays. So that's always been a niche. So when I was in logistics, something just wasn't stirring the Kool-Aid, man. Like, it was fine, but there was a high level of stress to it, and something wasn't really right. And I needed something more. And so I got this wild idea one day, like, man, it'd be really cool to train athletes. Like, it really was that simple. I'm watching like maybe LSU and Auburn play football, and I'm like, man, would it be awesome if I did that? And so I kind of looked into it. Next thing I know, I'm reaching out to inner city Memphis schools and just saying, hey, I just want to come help out, coach football. I didn't really know exactly what route that was going to go. I mean, by day two, I'm watching how they're working out, and I'm going, this could be a little bit more efficient. I'm like, Coach, what do you think about X, Y, and Z? And he's like, man, do it, dude. Just go. And I've grabbed the reins and ran ever since. And so I worked at inner city Memphis for a minute. Then I went to Middletown High School in Cincinnati. I told my fiance, I said, when we met in Memphis. She's from Ohio, which down here we call that a Yankee. No insult there, but it is what it is. But I remember telling her really, like seriously, I was like, look, I'm not moving north of the Mason-Dixon. Just understand that like this is where the soul boy belongs. And she's a psychologist too, by the way. And lo and behold, I moved north of the Mason-Dixon, and I just kept getting further north, right? So I was at Middletown, Ohio, a big school up there, great school to this day. Still think it's a sleeping giant, but there's a cultural element that's got to tie in, and it just never really did. Then I got an opportunity to go to Notre Dame and work with football under Matt Balis and Jake Flint, who's at LSU, and just learned a lot from those guys in chasing development. Then went back to Cincinnati and ended up at Ohio State working through Wexner Medical Center, which is like, it was more sports medicine, and you got contracted out to work with essentially a high school. Then end up going to Cleveland and work with Solon High School, which is another big high school up in Cleveland. Ran all the strength programs there, and then wound up back in Cincinnati. And then this opportunity at Christian Brothers came up, and it was just kind of like, there's kind of two parts to this story because it's like an onion, right? It's got different layers. When I was at Middletown, I made this list. And I don't know how many strength coaches do it, but I'm assuming a good deal of people kind of do this thing. I made a list of places that I thought would be like this awesome, perceptive place to go, like your top jobs. Like, this would be cool, right? When I was at Middletown, I made a list, and the number one job on my list was Notre Dame football. 4 months later, I was sitting in office, and Matt Balis would get an opportunity to go work with Notre Dame football. Well, when I was at Solon, I kind of had to readjust that plan, right? Like the plan and the thought process had changed because the development process had changed. I was like, man, maybe I don't have to go to this level. Maybe there's some variety to this. So I made another list. And number one high school in my mind, perception-wise, was Christian Brother High School. I knew what they had. I knew what the facilities were. And we have top of the line facilities. I mean, if I just showed you pictures and didn't tell you what it was, you would not ask if it was a high school. Um, they done a great job putting that together. But Christian Brothers High School was the top job there. And 6 months later, I was the head strength coach at Christian Brothers High School. So manifestation ain't a joke. It's a thing. And so you say, how did you get where you got? Well, I manifested it, so to speak, and just grinded the way everywhere I've been to try to do the best that I could. And here we are. And now I'm talking to you and learning and living, you know?
I mean, I was just about to say, I believe they call that manifestation,
That's
what
it.
you're talking about right there. But that's incredible, and I think it does speak to one. I love your story, right? Because a lot of people kind of think strength and conditioning, the barrier for entry is going to be college. Once you're in college, you got to be an exercise science major, and then you got to go intern and do all those things, and you transition from a completely different career, made it work, and then you listed out your top places, and you got to go to both of them on your original list and your adjusted list. And so, I mean, I think for one, anybody who is listening and is maybe considering that career change, thinking about going over to it, I mean, this is a perfect example of you can get it done, and you can do
Right.
it exactly how you want to do it too. It doesn't have to be, you have to take these terrible deals or go intern and work for 80 hours a week and not make nothing.
Right.
You can make a difference. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's kind of like two parts to that too in its own right. Like, I mean, I have a bachelor's degree in philosophy. Like, my master's degree is disaster preparedness and emergency management. And if we sit here and unpack what that master's was, like four tiers here: preparedness, mitigation, response, recovery. Do all those apply to strength and conditioning? 100%. And if you ain't thinking about all four of those things all the time, you're probably missing the boat somewhere. But on the flip end of it, one thing I talk to a lot of my people in my five, if you will, about is just this is the deeper dive with your people. And I go, man, am I always going to want to be in a weight room? No matter what the level is, are we always going to, am I going to want to be 55 in a weight room? Do I really want to do that? Not saying you can't, because there's a lot of awesome ones that have done it. I mean, the GOAT, Buddy Morris, like, are we all going to be like him? I don't know. I hope we can be, but I doubt it, because he's a different kind of breed, right? So are we all going to be in a weight room? And so having an ability and a niche to be able to go in any industry and excel, like, I think that's the most versatile thing that you can do and be. And so having come from another background or someone that's in strength and conditioning, how do you pivot it whenever you're tired of it or you need a change? Like, to what your point is, like, whatever you want to do, man.
I mean, it made a difference for me even going into sports psych versus exercise science, right?
100%.
And, you can look at it from different angles. And to me, I've talked about it ad nauseum on the podcast, and our listeners don't even want to hear it anymore about self-determination theory, which we talked about a little bit, right? But,
Dude, it killed. It killed. I've been on it the last 2 days. I got a book. I got a sports psych book. That's all I'm gonna say.
You've been rolling.
Dude, you just like rolled out the red car. Oh, it made my presentation for Saturday. It just
It's
because
awesome.
we were already doing, like me and you talked about, like we were already
Yep.
getting certain pieces. I just didn't know. Like, I talked to another awesome Connor up at Army, Connor Hughes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember telling him one time, I go, man, there are things that I do, and I know it's science based, and there's things that I don't know where it is in the books or the literature. I just know it needs to be done, and I know what result I need to get out of doing it, and I get it. And I don't know what the word is or the science is for it, but we just do it. And so
Yep.
your self-determination theory, like, that's things that a lot of coaches are probably doing or getting results because they're using it. But if they knew about it, they would
Hmm.
use it more like intently, and then they would get even more results. So, dude, I mean, if that's all we get, dude, that was gold.
Well, I mean, I remember sitting in class one day and I was just like, this is just what good coaches do. Like and
Right.
I raised my hand and I even asked a question. I was like, isn't this just good coaching? And of course, on the sports psych side, they're like, no, it has to be theory, So I'm like, all right, well, I don't know. But exactly your point, right? Is I was able to look at something that a lot of coaches do and say, okay, there is a framework to this and you can even enhance it and make it even more of a skill. Were there certain things, besides the 4 points that you just listed or other things that you take from your background in philosophy, law enforcement, logistics that, has allowed you to be successful as a strength coach?
Yeah, I think, man, there's a number of pieces. I think, let's go chronologically. When I was a cop, I remember a lot of friends of mine that knew me prior to. were like, when I became a police officer, they were like, "You're a cop? Like, you're a police officer?" Like, because I was always a really laid back guy. Like, so people that know me, that happen to me, listen to this, and when I say this, they're gonna go, "Laid back? No, not ever." But when you're in law enforcement, what's going to make you good is a vast knowledge of procedures and the law, and how to talk to people and how to deal with people and how to read people. Like, I got obsessed with body language. Uh, when we went what was called a pre-academy, where our department, it was really thorough to get a job there. Like, they started out with 100 and it wound up dialing down to about 8 that when it was all said and done. And then they ran us through like a little pre-academy, little like, here's kind of what you're going to get when you go to the academy. And when we did the interview and interrogation part, I remember being like obsessed with body language, because I was kind of leaning forward, and I'm always a twitchy person. So I'm always shaking a little bit. People probably think something wrong with me, too much coffee. And I just remember thinking like, man, that's so cool. But they were talking about how important body language was, because when you're out on a call and it's just you and somebody, man, you don't know what they've done or what they hadn't done. If they start looking around, you better believe they're about to run. And so you need to start looking around and going, if they are going to run, where are they going to run, and what kind of threat am I going to get myself caught up into? So, like, I got on a body language training. So that's a very important thing in what we do, because, being able to read your athlete and get a vibe for them, and even an emotional intelligence of kind of going, like, my football coach all the time, he'll be like, "What do you think about this guy?" And I go, "Well, he's this and this because I think he's this way because of this, this, and this." Like, you do a whole psychological analysis of your athlete, because they're all a little bit different, right? And we don't have enough time in the day. Most people don't. I know I don't with high school and all the athletes I have. I don't have enough time in the day to run an hour-long psych session with them every other day or 2 days a week to really get to know them. So you better have some innate ability to pick up like energy and emotional intelligence. One other thing with that world was, again, I was pretty laid back, and this with strength and conditioning, and I see this in a lot of my interns. Command presence. I'm in a room full of boys. I got all teenage boys, so it is just an ocean and sea of testosterone flowing every which way. Right? I mean, it's got some good, it's got some bad. I mean, you got different levels there, and so I don't want to be, and I'm really structured about how we do what we do. Like, that's a non-negotiable. But at the same time, I can't just be some drill sergeant, because, man, they're teenage boys, and teenage boys are trying to buck the system at every chance they get. Let's just call it a spade a spade. And so I'm pretty, like, outside the weight room, I'm like, hey, I'll be your brother. I'll be big bro. Like, I'll bump shoulders with you. But when you cross that iron line, it's a different animal. And so having that ability where, like, they can come talk to me about anything they want to talk to me about, and that's our business. But when you come in that room, I got to run the room. It's my room. And there's times where I let the throttle off, and sometimes the culture takes over, and there's times where I let the throttle off and their focus ain't there. And something happens, and I got to take over that room. And that's that command presence, that being on an accident scene with 2 cars and 3 people got to go to the hospital, and somebody's got a DUI, and you got people lined up on the street trying to watch and see what's going on. You got to run that situation, and you got to do it 7 minutes ago. You know what I mean? And so those things carried over to the next job, and the next job carried over to the next job. Like, everything we do is honing skills. And those are 2 skills that I think the past has helped tremendously in what we do.
Did you struggle at all in that change of careers? Were there any things that I guess maybe habits that you learned from law enforcement, or things that had been ingrained in you, and then now switching to strength and conditioning, maybe went against what you typically see within strength and conditioning?
I think that transitionally was from law enforcement to like corporate world. So like operation, logistic management, like when I worked in logistics, which is trucks and transportation and all that. I mean, everything there is 7 minutes ago. Like, everything there literally is 7 minutes ago. Like, everything had to happen 7 minutes ago. Load just got booked. Hey, is it there yet? Just got booked. Like, they're going to California. No, it ain't. But that's the mentality. And being excessively organized, like, you have to be. So from the law enforcement to this, it was a little bit of a challenge because you had to learn how to lead people and not manage people. And sometimes in law enforcement, people show up and they go, "Look, I'm the police. Do what I tell you." When if the approach was, "Hey, I'm the police. Here's what I have to give to the situation. Let me lead you through this process." So really, that transition was tough. And plus, they always say, "Once a cop, you're always a cop. You never know how to not be a cop." That's kind of faded with time. Uh, I don't drive around in my car, in my truck, and see somebody with a headlight out or, oh man, look, they got expired tags. Like I don't do that every day anymore. So that was a bigger challenge, from that one to the next. But when I went from logistics to really starting to coach, it was like instantaneous, right? Uh, Command the room, rapport with students. It was a different kind of stress, like I created the demand, I created the expectation, so I self-imposed stress. The hours that I wanted to put in, you get it, like so. Those transitions weren't as bad. I think the other transition from in strength and conditioning was like when you get into college level, people really don't care what you did before, good or bad, if that's a thing. I think you got to play in everybody's experience because you got to look at their skills. But I think a lot of time in this order of business is, oh, you're an intern or you're whatever, like, or you're a GA or you're low man on totem pole. Just do your role, which is there's a lot of truth to that. But sometimes you might be missing a highly skilled person, or they might have a skill that could help level your program up. You just got to put them in charge of that duty and say, go with it, right? So that was a little bit of a challenge right there. Just knowing, like, dude, I was a cop for 4 years. Like, I've ran like big operations, and then you go to this and you kind of got to play that role, as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. No. That makes complete sense. And so you were saying with the logistics side, it was a self-imposed stress, or the strength and conditioning side?
When you go to the strength and conditioning side, it was kind of self-imposed
Yeah.
because again, logistics, the stress was there. Like the things that they asked us to do. I mean, it's a long story that no one really wants to probably hear that, but like the way the model was set up, man, it was like, man, you're talking about the line on a piece of paper of like success and failure.
Mm.
Um, and you had to manage it because there was metrics to that world, like things getting delivered, and there was things way outside of that control, and it was always like, well, I don't care if it's outside of our control, it's got to happen. Like it's like telling me I got to turn invisible and walk through this wall. Like, well, find a way, make it happen. So you kind of learn how to just not be a person that wants to find an out, and you kind of become a person that wants to find an in, right?
Mm.
But then when you get to coaching, um, you know, kids doing it the right way or athletes doing it this way, and this is why you got to do it this way. It's not just because I'm trying to be the dictator, it's because this is the best way to keep you safe and get the most out of you in this moment. And so you got a lot of like, you know, those that can't or those that won't, and trying to get them to buy into that or believe in that. So that's a self-imposed stress because if you don't give a crap how it looks, how well they move, or how fast they run, or how much they buy into the culture, if you don't care, you ain't losing sleep at night. You know what I mean? But if it matters, yeah, but it's self-imposed. You could always choose to turn it off, I guess. I mean, if you're wired that way, you're wired that way.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. I think that's the biggest struggle a lot of strength coaches have is, you can get a lot of positive feedback, but if you're seeing stuff that you don't necessarily like seeing or stuff that is not up to your standard, then you're going to struggle with it, and that will keep you up at night. And
Yeah.
that's the self-imposed stress. I mean, it happens like that. You talked about the culture, you talked about the standard. What are the things that you kind of focus on in development with your high school guys?
Well, I would say in general, I think like the cultural approach to things is I think there's a blueprinted systematic approach, right? Um, and the big thing for me is like understanding that we have a connected future. Like when I get to a place, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm not going to know exactly what identity shifts need to happen with our mentality. So the first thing that's always got to happen in any organization is you got to have a connected future. You got to see who actually wants to be on this bus and kind of get a vibe of who don't want to be on the bus. And then you can deep dive into why don't they want to be on the bus? And do I just need to get all these people on the bus and then they'll follow? There's a whole process to that. And so that's one of the big things with the high school level that I'm at. I think it would be for me anywhere I'll go at it, whatever I did. But that's an important one just because I go back to, and I might be chasing this. Maybe we all chase some past, all right? I chase my high school experience, which I might not have, really taken to heart. But like I got to play football at what was called Wynn High School in Arkansas. It's in the Delta, man. Like if you ain't got a lab, at least a Labrador Retriever, man, if your dog's smaller than that, you probably ain't gonna have a dog very long because the old mosquito's gonna haul it off, right? So like, uh, all we did was just play football and go hunting. I mean, that's basically all you could do. But we were really good. We had a tremendous culture. We lined up in a inverted wishbone and we ran right at you. Our football coach had a shirt that had a stop sign on it. Our team was called the Yellow Jackets. When Yellow Jackets said had a stop sign on it said 27 trap, stop this. On the back had a play drawn up said 27 trap, can you stop it? So like we do this stuff repetitiously over and over and over again. And then he was basically out there going, look, I believe in you so much. I won't tell them what we're going to do. Hell, I'll give them the playbook, and let's see if they can stop it. And then, so kind of growing up in that environment where like, just we were so connected to what we did. I never got off a bus and thought, we ain't going to win this game. Like I never had any doubt, and so like to be a part of something like that, to be a program that like, man, I think we had a nickname called Beast of the East. Like that's a cool thing. And not everybody gets to be a part of that, even a little bit. And so it's cool to strive for it, right? It's cool to set that as the bar. And so that's the connected future I want to create wherever I go is like, man, we're going to be the team that people don't want to play. Like, doesn't mean we're going to go stack banners in the rafters or we're going to be looking like Michael Jordan or Nick Saban with a bunch of championship rings, but we can create an identity in our culture that they don't want to touch us. They know they could probably beat us. They might get out talent us, but they're going to hate every second of it. And that's tangible, right? That's effort based. That's doable. So when you think of culture with any level, especially high school, that's what I try to, I guess, instill in them the most.
What are the struggles you face with instilling that? Because I agree. I think it's fun to be a part of a group like that, right? It's exciting, and if you hold yourself to that standard, it continues to grow and it becomes easier and easier each year. But it's also hard to initially instill. What are some of the challenges that you face with it?
Well, I mean, again, I've kind of got to be at different type of schools, from schools that had a more urban setting to schools that families did really well, and obviously at a private school. I think one of the big things that makes that challenging is, it wasn't hard for us to be that way because we were middle of nowhere, Delta, Arkansas. We ain't come from much. 8,000 people in our town. Everybody wanted to get out. Everybody had an internal purpose to buy in or believe in this process. It was a way out, right? When you don't have to have that way out, you're not as motivated towards it, right? Like it's the self-determination theory, right? Like it's the competence. Like they just want to be competent. Like, hey man, as long as we're good, I'm good. Well, we don't. Okay, well, change your perception of how good you want to be. So I think the challenge is just getting people to really desire that idea. Whenever that may not be their central focus, is sport or being that way, right? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So how have you done that?
um, Man, it's consistency, right? Like it's consistently telling the story of the purpose, right? Constantly doing it over and over and over again. It's getting you're going to get some like early adopters is what it's referred to as, like people that are like, that's what I want. And you'll see those guys in like every group and every team. There's two or three at minimum that they're like, yes, that's what we want to be. These are the guys that are working their butt off genuinely because they want to be really good. Every team's got those guys. You got to get those guys on the boat, in the bus, right? So getting them on board is part one. And then once they kind of follow and you start teaching them leadership stuff, like it's a tangible thing for me. Like leadership is growth. It's a growth skill. Put them in positions of leadership in like owning things and attack. Like I'll do like the warm up, right? Like they don't walk in our weight room free. They come into our weight room. But if I'm really trying to dial in on these things with a team, the first thing is they come in the room. The warm up stays the same every day. It's really, joint by joint based. Everybody's got to try to do the warm. Everybody's got to run it, and then you give them little cues along the way, like you don't run it for them. You just might walk behind them and go, "Hey, a little louder. You got it. Oh, you're good." And then the next part is before they walk in the room, I might go, "Hey, Connor, it's your day today, man. Hey, by the way, if it ain't done right, it's on you. You got it. Like if you see somebody not doing it right, just start it over. It's okay. Everybody's gonna be all right with it. Everybody's good with that. We got to hold each other accountable. We good with that? Yeah. And then the next piece is, I ain't saying nothing to nobody. I'm just going to give them the briefing. Hey, this is what we got to do today. Somebody run the warm up, hold it accountable. Let's go to work. And then they come in and the cream's going to rise to the top, right? And then if they let it go on good or if they fix it and change it, that's when you start knowing they want to be about something a little bit more than just being on a team, right? Then it's starting to become internally motivated, if you will. And so now every day when you're in there, I'm just selling the Kool-Aid, man. I'm just like, hey, it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time before we're that team on that schedule where people go, God, like, dang, man, we got to play them. Like it's coming. And then every one of them like the idea. Mm-hmm. They just don't necessarily understand everything that has to, take for account, which is why I'm like, look, I know what it's going to take. I get it. Just trust the process. We're going to do this together. Okay. It just takes, it takes time. It takes time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, and what I like about what you've done too, is it's not just team to team, right? It's not, football sticks with football, wrestling sticks with wrestling. You sent me a picture the other day of two of your best athletes on different teams working together. Can you talk to me a little bit about that process too?
That was a struggle, at first, because when they brought that idea to us, we were like, man. And I'm not really a person that's going to tell you something can't work per se. I'm just going to tell you we could do this, but it's going to present additional challenges. It's the emergency manager in me. I'm going to be like, we could do that, but if we're going to do that, we got to do A, B, and C as well, right? So we knew that was going to be a challenge, and it's definitely different for me, but I got to go to a place I ain't never been. I've learned a way to do things that I ain't never done. So it gives me a level up if there's ever a next stop or etc. But, having different guys at different teams is kind of important too, because those two guys that you saw was a basketball player, which is why I sent that to you. And then our wrestlers are some unique guys, to say the least. I really enjoy them. But man, they're cut from a different cloth, right? And it's all respect too, man. Like we're good. Like our wrestling team ain't no joke. Like I had a kid, little sidebar. He was a state champ. Like we have some brothers, the Bauer brothers, and every single one of them have been state champions. One brother's at Air Force Wrestling, the other one went to NYU, and then I got the third one right now. He won state last year. I fully expect him to do it again this year. One of my favorite kids. Just very unique kid. And that's what makes him awesome, because he is him. And you got to love people like that, man. Like he ain't going to the mo. Then he jerking knot in you pretty quick. And so the story is his brother that went to NYU, he won the state championship. He went to the state championship tournament, and I may misquote this, but I'm pretty close, in like 316 seconds. Like that's his total time on the mat. And so I used to do this when I was at Solon. I'd be walking through our wrestling room to get to the gym, and the boys would be in there wrestling. And we didn't have wrestling at Wynn. I mean, we wrestled, but that was out back by a pickup, rolling around in the Pine Eagles or something. But I would walk through the wrestling room at Solon. I would just get in there and tussle around with them like it's all passive. I'm just going to try not to get taken down. So I see at Christian Brothers, I see our kid that just won state in 316 seconds up there, and I go, hey, man, you want some? And I'm just pestering him, really. And they don't flinch, man. Like if you give them, if you offer a good time, they're about to take it all the way. And so he was like, are you for real? And I'm like, All right, let's go. I'm just curious. I'm just curious how good you are. I know nothing, right? And I mean, we ain't really about to go at it, but he was. So we get in there, and dude destroyed me. I mean, but he's an absolute assassin, absolute
Mhm.
assassin, and it's just awesome how good those guys are. But the short story back to the point there is that one kid, won state, and then this other kid has a tremendous amount of pressure on him. I mean, he's a 6'8" sophomore. He looks the part. He is the greatest human I've ever met. I mean, he is. I wish I could put him in your weight room for 2. You'd be like, dude, you can't have him back. He's awesome. I mean, just as a human, especially. I mean, I'm 6'8" with the notoriety that kid's got. I like to think I could be as good of a human as he is. You know what I mean? But I put those two guys together because they're both winter sports. So the things that I want to do are relatively comparable. And I just kind of told him, I said, there's probably no two people in our school that has more pressure on them than you two guys. And I want you to work on that together. And man, they might be the two best partner groups of any group that I've had. They work really well together. They got similar demeanors, and it's neat, man. It's neat to see.
Well, I mean, it just makes sense to me. I mean, exactly what you said right there is just two people with a lot of pressure on them. You win a state championship, you're going to college for wrestling. I mean, that's a guarantee. And then if you're going to go back and win another one, which sounds like you will, I mean, it's the exact same as the position the basketball players in. So to have them be able to work together is important too, because when you talk about developing what you want to develop, right, it's getting those people who are bought in, have that internal motivation to do it well. And then it's not only are they leading their team, but it's those two with each other.
Right.
They have that internal motivation that's to the highest level
Right.
because of the success that they've had.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow. Well, I mean, it was awesome. That picture made me smile, and it was good.
I appreciate
It was
that.
a real nice little road trip. So, one thing I'm curious about as well too, and just getting to know you is you've reached out to a lot of coaches. You keep asking other coaches, questions about what their specialties are. You've talked to me about self determination theory. You mentioned Connor up at Army. A lot of other coaches that you've reached out to. How'd you start going about that process for anybody who's might be curious to do that? And how has that process been for you and help with your development?
Well, it kind of starts with, like philosopher, man, you're always searching for knowledge. But like, let's go back to, you know, Solon, for example, we were really elite at swimming. And kind of like, rolling around in the Pine Needles to wrestling, all I knew about swimming was like, man, we're going to go swim. Go swim in the lake or something. Like, that's all I knew. Uh, but we were really elite. And the one thing I like about strength and conditioning, and again, I tell stories on top of stories, you might notice, is like, I got this from my stepdad, is the ability to look at an athlete, assess how it moves, and then knowing enough about your field to know what they need. I don't got to know what a swimmer does per se. I don't got to really know anything about swimming to know how their movement functions or how they move in lacrosse to know what they need as an athlete. However, there are pieces of the conditioning, the energy systems, and how much load they're putting on and taking off that I don't know. So when I had our swimmers up there, our coach was a very particular person and wanted to do certain things in the weight room. And a lot of that comes sometimes in high school. It's just they're doing what they've always known, and it's not necessarily what's the most efficient or the best for what the athlete needs. So I just basically looked up what's the best swimming program in the country, University of Texas, and I reached out to them because I figured if you want to know how to make a particular kind of athlete be the best, then why not ask the best, and then just go down that rabbit hole. And that's where a lot of doors have opened up. It's just like with baseball, we're fortunate enough, or I'm fortunate enough, that the head strength coach at Vanderbilt baseball is a Christian Brother alum. So I call that dude up anytime, and he's awesome. He linked me up with 3 or 4 other guys. So I talked to Billy Anderson in South Carolina, who's awesome, which get that guy on. I mean, that dude's awesome. Like, and I appreciate that in guys too, because you got guys that won't talk to you, or they got too much going on. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I worked in a lot of different industries, and if you got too much going on, you're just not managing your time right. And people don't want to hear that. But football guys, you got 5 guys on staff and 4 interns, and you're there from 4 in the morning to like 8 at night. Dude, that's like 360 man hours a day. Like, dude, come on, man. I added that up one time at Notre Dame. And I told Flint, I was like, dude, we could all load up uh, in a van all together and never stop driving and go from New York City to LA 7 times in the man hours that we spend this week. That's so again, think about how efficient we are. And if we're spending that much time, we ought to know everything about everything of the athlete. You know what I mean? So, the big thing, I just go back to you reach out to the people when you need things. And so you're more intrigued to ask the questions. And good people, they're going to talk to you. And the other ones that don't, ain't got no use for you, man. It is what it is.
I love that calculation, and that's my biggest thing too. And I've talked with Scott Caulfield about it a lot, as the kind of belief that everybody's so busy, and
Yeah.
it's like I can make the time, like
Right,
like
right.
I've got 2 practices in a day, 2 lifts, maybe 3, like it is what it is. Like the exact amount of hours that'll take up, I've got time,
Right,
and
right.
everybody always says you're so busy, you're a college strength coach. I'm like, I'm good. Like, I promise you, I'm really not that swamped.
And at the end of the day, too, not to take away from anything, and I've done this too. When I was early in college, I mean, I worked a job, worst job I've ever had. I worked in this like freezer warehouse. You had to put this big, like, I don't know what it's called. I don't know, overall zone or something. And you just rode around on a forklift, just picking things up, moving it around in this like -degree freezer, 12 hours a day, 7 at night to 7 in the morning. I'm like, dude, even if you are working 13, 14 hours a day, you're in a weight room. Like, I don't even got to explain the rest of it, but like, you're in a weight room at the University of such and such. You get to hang out with, come on, man. Come on, man.
Um, yeah, like even practice is just me watching basketball.
Come
Like,
on, man.
it's not that hard. No, I love it.
I mean,
And so I'm curious as well, just because I do speak with other coaches, and I do sometimes hear that they get afraid of like the rejection aspect of it. How much more frequent was it to speak with a coach and they'd be willing to talk with you versus somebody who was kind of curt and didn't really give you the time?
well, I'm kind of tactical about who I reach out to. So I don't really get a lot of people to not talk or not reach out. I think, some of the people that I know that I like to talk to more, they do got a lot on their plate. But for the most part, I've been pretty lucky, like I haven't had a lot of it, but I also think it depends on how you figure out how to get in touch with them. If they have Instagram, that might be a little bit easier route. If you know somebody, that's another big one that I think people need to understand is like, if you get Kurt Hester on the phone, and he's awesome, awesome. I could talk a whole hour probably, and I ain't even really got to spend a lot of time with him. I got to spend a little bit of time with him. But you get him on the phone and you get to talk to somebody and you ask questions and you take an interest in who they are and what they bring to the table. And it's about their, whatever they're willing to give you, right? And most of us that are in this industry for the right reason, we're aiming to give. That's it. We're aiming to give, period. And then you just go, man, anybody that I could talk to in this, whatever the thing is. Yeah, I know so-and-so over here. Okay, would you be willing to sure, man, whatever. And that's what happened with Walker. He was like, here's Billy's phone number. Here's the guy at Mississippi State. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, I don't need too many opinions because, you know what I mean? But
No, it's one big chain. It's exactly correct. And when you get to that personal referral level, like it's I've noticed it's easier to. Somebody sends me somebody's number, I'll say,
right,
yeah, absolutely, I'll talk to them because I know you, and
yeah,
I know
yeah.
you're not going to send me anybody who's a weirdo or anything like that. So it makes a difference for sure.
That's too funny. For sure, for
Well,
sure.
so how long have you been at Christian Brothers High School now?
Uh, over not two over 2 years now, or 2
Okay,
years,
and
right?
so
2 years.
And we talked about the gradual progress that it is behind the culture development standpoint. How do you feel like your program is now with the current spot they're at? And, are there any things that you're continuing to to improve?
Um, I think the changing of the schedule kind of it changed some dynamics because um, building the culture as a whole is one part, but to me that's really just very foundational. Each team kind of has to have a little bit different identity. That's a subjective opinion. Um, and so when you don't have the team together doing the team thing, it makes it more challenging. So I would say, if we hadn't changed the schedule, or if we had changed the schedule but we kept our teams together, I think we would be further along culturally. But you also got to ask yourself, is your organization, do they want to be elite culturally too? And if that's not a thing, you're going to fight that anyway. But I do believe like our kids are getting into this thing. Like I still have a culture in that weight room. And inside of your culture, you end up having what's known as belonging cues. I love Daniel Coy's book, The Culture Code. If you never read it, read it. It's awesome. And he talks about belonging cues like, the Navy SEALs, first one in, last one out, frogmen, only easy days yesterday. Those are all phrases that they use. He talks about that. He says, when you go to these elite cultures, they all have these like belonging cues, these things that they say are kind of be almost inside jokey, if you will. And it almost comes off kind of corny, right? And so for me, that's a big piece where like when kids start quoting or saying certain things, I know like, okay, at least this part is instilled. And like our guys, especially our football guys, I'm a super obsessed with training the neck, right? Like we do a lot of manual resistant work. Thank you, Matt Bayless, for showing me all that. So we do a lot of manual resistant neck work. I do a lot of trap work. I got some shoulder trap finishers that will just blow your shoulders up super quick. And I say, you got to look like a grown man. Like this is what a grown man looks like. And our kids, our kids will go, especially like back in football season, like we were playing some games and some guys would grab us and pull our face mask. And that's like, I didn't have to say nothing. I'd have 13, 14 kids on the sideline going, we train the net. We train the net. That's what, and like I have a couple of kids said, like, Coach, that's because we train the net. And it was just like, dude, that's so, you know what I mean? Like those moments are almost so much better than a guy pulling a heavy weight off the ground or something, because they're internally like bought into it or believing in it, even if it's just to be funny. They're just saying it, like so we have a series of things that our guys will say that I'm like, all right, rubbing off on them. It's a process, but it seems to be working.
No, that's amazing. I love that. And it's a good moment of pride as a strength coach too. Because like you said, you can tell that it's all integrated and it's all clicking for them.
Yeah. Well, funny story. I got to share this one. It's so good. When I was at Solon, of course, Solon, Cleveland, Ohio, they get real snow up there. Like we got snow on the ground by 5 inches. It's just basically crippled the entire infrastructure. Right, 5 inches of snow. But at Solon in Cleveland, they get real snow up there, and I don't know. It's like when it was, but we had like 2 feet felt like of snow on the football field. So I had all my groups, and I had them all in teams. I had them all go build snowmen one day. We just had a snowman challenge. Everybody could build a snowman. And the football team gets out there. They build this snowman. They build this big old snowman. And it's probably about 7 feet tall. It's a big old joker. And one kid looks back, and they're like sitting there kind of assessing what needs to happen. And one kid goes, we messed up. And they're like, what? He goes, we didn't put a neck on it. We got to train the neck. And so they take the head off, and they build this snowman, a big old neck, and then put the head back on. And it's like a 9-foot tall snowman. And they're like, see, Coach, even our snowmen train the neck. And so it's just like, it's just funny, dude. Like,
well, it just makes it fun.
It just shows you.
Makes it come, yeah.
They and it's all that thing, connect to a future. Like,
yeah,
that future was just we trained the net. Like, all right,
and they will for the rest of their lives. I bet you.
There you go.
Well, man, Cody, I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed getting to know you as well, just personally. But if anybody here has anything they want to reach out or ask you about, what would be a good way to do it?
Man, probably Instagram or my email. Just C Coley at cbhs.org, or my Instagram is Coach One More at Coach One More. So I got that name from a kid when I first started coaching. There's a whole story to that one too. Everything's got a story, man, and it ain't worth keeping in your mind. Or at Coach One More. I put a lot of the content that of our guys' training and a couple other things on there. I ain't too crazy about putting myself on there, but I like to kind of show the quality of work that we do and kind of give them kind of attaboys, because it's just like old Don Campbell putting that shirt on and saying, here's what we're going to do. When you tell the world, you tell them kind of indirectly, hey, proud of what you're doing, and I want to represent it, right? So I would say just one of those two routes would probably be just fine. Or if they know you, then you got my number, then we can go that route too, right?
There you go. Yep, that's exactly. They can do that too. 100%.
There you go.
It's all a chain. Yep.
Yeah,
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Cody. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, brother.